Hello, everybody. ODAT Nerd here, aka Terrence. This is the pre-recorded video that is going to play at the start of every Devember video. So, what day is it? If you're watching this on the day that I recorded it, probably a day in December. What day? I don't know. I'm not creating 31 of these things. This is to tell you that we are working on the Devember project, which is a remote build system in Sublime Text. Now, down in the description, if I have done my job correctly, there should be a link to the playlist that has all of the videos in this series, which starts with the video that describes what the heck it is we're actually trying to build here. And this video will be a minimum of an hour long. I don't know how long it's going to go because I haven't recorded it yet. It's still November right now while I'm reading this to you out of my brain. That's not actually written down anywhere. I think that's probably easy to tell. I'm not very good at talking off the top of my head into a camera. So what are we going to be doing tonight? Don't know. Hopefully working on something really interesting, though. Probably should have thought that through a little bit more. In any case, we're going to go ahead and say the following. If you like these videos and you want to know when there's going to be more of them, subscribe to the channel, link in the description. If you're interested in videos that aren't live in nature, there's another channel I have that is going to be providing those. I have in the past and I will again. I'm just not right now because I'm doing this every day for December and it's taking up all my free time. Link to that is in the description. Like any videos that you find useful, comment on any videos if you have any questions, and most importantly, have a good time. So let's go ahead and give it to myself in the present, if you will, to continue on faceless because I don't have the sort of setup that allows me to stream my face while I'm working. Thanks, past me. Hello, present you. So here we are in the first Devember live stream setup. Now, here's how this is going to work going forward. My general modus operandi when I'm working on a Devember project is that I always have an evening time, such as now, where I would dedicate 1 or probably 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on what I'm working on, to actually developing my hour of code for Devember. And then once that's all done, I need to shut that down and do all of my final commits for the day and push them up to GitHub and then go and write the blog. And that's always the part where things drag, especially if the coding session went a little bit longer because I was fixing something or doing something interesting. But in addition to that, I generally also have time earlier in the day, depending, say before work, around lunchtime, after work, early evening, where I might do something Devember related, maybe write a little bit of code in preparation for what I'm going to be doing in the evening, doing research, all that kind of thing. That stuff's not going to appear in the live stream, obviously, because I'm not going to be streaming 24 hours a day. That would be incredibly dumb. And what we're going to actually do is just do 1 hour here, and that means that once the hour or so, depending when that's an hour of coding, not an hour of this chitty chat at the beginning. When that part is done, then I'll shut down the stream. I might do a little bit more coding, but I also have to give myself time to record a vlog to throw up as a synopsis for the day instead of the devlog. So you get to see a fair amount of stuff. And so at the beginning of every day, except for this day where I'm talking about how I'm doing this, I'll provide a quick synopsis in stream for people that are following the stream, what happened between the end of the last devlog or the last stream and now. And I'll also point out that December 1st is happening on a Saturday today. Tomorrow's Sunday. The weekend days are my days with the least free time. I wake up earlier in the morning. I do more exercise. We do chores. We have our family time. So these are 2 days where things are going to be fairly scant in the, stuff that might have happened earlier on type operation. Now, let's also point out that there should be a link to the GitHub repository that we're working on down in the description area of the video. You can follow along with that if you want. At the end of every day, I push up the final commits and tag the last commit of the day with that day, like day-01 or whatever. The current tag is day 0, which is the initial code. As we can see, I have open here in the window right now. This is the folder. It's extracted to my local source folder, but it's set up to be cloned directly into, say, your packages folder. I have mine in local source and I symlink it into the packages folder. And the directory remote build server is the .NET part of this. That's going to be the actual server that runs, and everything else that's not overhead like the git ignore and the license and the README is going to be the Sublime package version. So right now what we have here is this, and if you're going to have to look in the commit that's tagged as day 0. I have a couple of bit.ly links to two things. One, the source code for this .NET async server listener code, which comes from the .NET API browser and is an example of how to do things. Props to Keith Hall for pointing me at that while I was out doing a morning walk and pondering maybe I should use .NET for the server component instead of what I was planning on doing, because it's something that I want to learn, and Devember is all about learning. But what I was afraid of is, does it have a fairly decent socket API like C or other languages would have, or does it have one that makes you want to cry like Java? And it turns out it's pretty good. So he pointed me at this code. There's a link to it in the, if you actually care about it, in the commit message where I added this file to the repository on day 0. But I have, first of all, as you can see in my inimitable style, and you'll see this a lot less in my Python code and more in my other code, I comment like a mad bastard when it comes to code that's not Python. Python code I don't comment as much because it seems that commenting in Python isn't as Pythonic or something. But I am a maintenance programmer by trade. I mean, that's one of the things I do. I write code and then I have to maintain it, and I have to maintain code other people wrote. So I strive to write code that I can read, which also means that I reformatted this because I don't like the, I would call it KNR style, but that's not really what it is because it's C#. In any case, except for that and a couple of very minor changes, like I changed this port, this code here is exactly that code. Similarly, I have test client code as well, which is based on, I'm going to guess, this link here. I threw a note in here to remind myself, and also a link to the library documentation just in case I lost my bookmark for that, because here is the ultimate goal, and we went over this in the introduction video for this particular thing. What we're wanting to create is a server, that's this stuff, in .NET, .NET Core 2.1, because that's cross-platform, and because I also want to learn more C# than I currently know. I know some, but not a great deal. So I want to learn that. That's what the server is going to be. It's going to be running and listening for connections from a client, which will be a plugin written in Sublime. And the whole point of the operation is to create a build system so that when you are writing some code and you hit Control B, it can send your current file across the network to the server and get it to execute a command there, or grab up a whole bunch of files and ship them over. Now, clearly, in the general case, you would probably want to use some sort of, maybe a shared file share or something, and then you don't have to send files over and you can just run it from the other side. And that's totally something that I think would probably be pretty easy to do. This is all based on the idea that I want something like this for my own use, to be able to write C# code and stuff here on my Linux computer, but run it with Windows tools on my Windows desktop to the left. And to use LinkPad and whatnot, and just for the experience of doing such a thing. And to that end, we're going to be writing the plugin code in pure Python, obviously, because that's the language that Sublime uses, but also Python 3.3.6, because that's the version that Sublime has embedded, and without using any third-party networking libraries, just core Sublime. And I'm aware I haven't looked. There are probably any number of third-party libraries that would be compatible that we could bring in as a dependency to make writing this plugin part easier. But my Devember goal, or one of my Devember goals, is to learn more about C Sharp and to learn more about raw networking and such forth as happens in Python. I don't want to learn how to use one of some number of libraries. Now, in particular, I'm pretty conversant with socket code. I've been doing it for quite a while now, so I'm interested in seeing how what I know maps back and forth between the two. So what we actually have here is this. The example is a server, and I'll go ahead and hide the sidebar now. The example server is an echo server, which listens for incoming connections. And when a connection has been accepted, it spins off a read call that reads bytes of data and then either triggers another read to get more data, or if it sees the special Sentinel string EOF, it writes that data back to the client. And as a part of the send, as we can see here, we call begin send. When the send has completed, we shut down the socket and close it. So it's a one-shot deal. And we're not going to go over that too much now. Over here, I have a dirt simple Sublime command. I made it an application command because I only want one of them that takes a host and a port. And what does it do? It creates an internet TCP socket and tries to connect to the host and port that were given, sends the string hello world with the token. Then it tries to receive data from the other end. And this part's just a little extra stuff to try to throw away the Sentinel tag on the string, and then it displays it in a message dialog pop-up, and if there are any errors, it pops up an error message. Now, this is exactly not the way to do this because, of course, while this command is running, the Sublime UI is effectively hung waiting for the command to exit. So if this connect takes 10 seconds to establish or 20 seconds to time out, that's 10 or 20 seconds that Sublime is just hung. And that's probably the worst user experience you could provide. So what we're going to do later is fix that up. This is just, the the sample proof of concept, if you will. And that by the same token, this is using blocking sockets and not non-blocking sockets, which is generally something I don't like. We've tried to use blocking sockets in the past, and there are various niggly things that are just pains in the butt. So I would really rather use a non-blocking socket than a blocking socket. However, it appears that Python has a great abstraction where instead of making something non-blocking, you can set it with a timeout, which is I think something that I saw in Lua socket as well, the library that I use there to add networking and socket code to Lua, which basically makes a blocking socket that effectively times out. And by using that in combination with select, you could probably get something pretty good. So that's what we're going to try. And lastly, if I was to edit the project, we can see that the project has its own build system built in. The main one uses .NET Build to build the current code. There's also a clean variant that does .NET Clean and a run variant that does .NET Run. And as a standard practice for myself, I have Control-Alt-Shift-K set to clean and Control-Alt-Shift-R set to run. So that allows me to either build, clean, or run. In addition, if you have watched my streams, you know I generally, when I set up a test command like this, bind a key. So I've bound a key to that, super T, no big whoop. And if I was to do something like this, we could see that I have made a slight modification to the standard exec command so that right before it's about to run a build, if there's an existing build running, it kills it first. And that's just because if I was to, I don't want to save that change. If I was to run this and then try to run it again, because Sublime doesn't automatically cancel a build, the next time when you run it the second time, it immediately fails because it can't bind the socket because the port's already in use by the running copy. And by that point, Sublime's lost its handle to the thing that it was running, so you can't cancel it either. And it's a big pain in the butt. So let's go ahead and just show what we have so far. So I hit Control Alt Shift R, and maybe it'll actually run something. Okay, there we go. That's listening for connections at. Now, that's my local host name. And when I run the sample command, we see that it says received hello world. And this is what I was talking about with things being a blocking command. Watch the output of the command here when I click OK. Now the server had all of those messages that it transmitted, or sorry, that it wrote to the console right when it happened. As soon as it accepted the connection, it wrote that. As soon as it read the bytes, it wrote that. When it got the final thing and said what it saw, it wrote that. It wrote the sending, it wrote closed. However, because this thing is blocking, none of that stuff could happen until this command finishes executing. Um, so that's the issue there. Oh, one other thing I did was I added a key binding so that if I Control C in the build results, it cancels the build because the break key on this keyboard doesn't do what I want. And to be honest, I have exactly 0 times in my life ever relied on Control Break to break something. I've always been a Control C or a Control backslash kind of guy. So this is what we have so far. And that's like 16 minutes of stuff. I wanted to let you know exactly how things stand at this point and where everything came from. So as I said, next tomorrow when we do this, there'll just be a synopsis of what I might have done after I stopped recording tonight and when I start recording tomorrow. So one of the first things that we want to do is we're gonna leave the server alone for the time being, and just concentrate on the client. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and I'll use this terminal emulator this time. One other thing to note is if you watch my last live stream, I was playing around with the idea of being able to have my browser. Oh, I forgot to turn this off. I have my browser pop in and out based on a key press, but I kept having issues with um, I forgot to press the key one time. Another time I pressed the key and something went full screen on the other monitor, and I ended up thinking I was streaming the Sublime window. So I've actually just gone ahead and thrown a couple of tabs over here. Oops, sorry. One for the .NET framework and another one, well, for the socket code for right now, but to a lesser degree, it's the Python documentation for pretty much the version that's built into Sublime. And I'll just try to do that. I don't like to do this. I like to have my whatever I'm referring to. Like I would rather have this on my right hand monitor so that I can refer to it and look at what it's saying while simultaneously doing this. But because I don't trust myself to forget to do something and I still want to show you what I'm doing, I've decided to do it this way. So the first thing that I want to do is, the thing that I was going to do in the terminal, which is go to local source Devember 2018 remote build server and type .NET run. And just have that going in the background. Excuse me, so that it's just always running so I can come here and just hit the key and away we go. And I've was playing with this a little bit. I have Terminus set up, so if I need to do something in the terminal, I can. But sometimes it goes a little doolally, if you will. So I'm gonna not worry about doing. I'll use it for some things, but I'm not going to keep it running in there. And similarly, I don't want to keep it just running in Sublime either, because then you have to know how to get to the build results and see things. And I like the idea of doing something like that. We can see there's that happening there. So What's the first thing we want to do? What we want, I should say, is to create a thread here. And I'm going to go ahead and start the 1 hour of code time right now. Now, believe it or not, I don't know everything about everything. um, but I would like to create a thread here and have all of this stuff happen in the thread. And my general case for something like that would be to either jump directly to Stack Overflow, see what I can see there, or um, do something, look at code I've already written that does something. So I'm going to look at Hyperhelp. I think I need to fetch here because these are, if you watch the last stream, these are the bootstrapper commits. This is the last one that was initial and that one I think I want. Yeah, because this has an example of a couple of things that I want. One is this. Uh, this version of Sublime Merge has a little bit of a problem where if you double click, uh, when you drag, or if you triple click to select the whole line and drag, it doesn't work. Text was doing the same thing. A dev build came out just the other day that actually fixed that. So the next dev build for Merge will probably do the same thing. But for right now, no. And well, we'll just grab the whole thing and I can worry about taking a little look at it later. I guess I just need a run method and an init method. Okay. So the important part is probably this, which I'm going to copy and bring over. I do, in fact, subscribe at some level to copy paste programming when I'm the one that wrote the code in the first place. We'll call this, say, network thread. Goes like so, and I didn't get the whole line, but that's okay because I don't actually want anything there. And I will also do a little of that because I like to. All the classes can be well, I think you normally separate them all like that. I try to keep that sort of style. I actually sort of need one at the bottom here as well, I think. With the 2 lines, and I'm gonna need a def run self, and let's say we're gonna pass a host and a port to this, and then self.host is host and self.port is port. And then I could, in theory, grab this entire thing. I'll copy it for now while we're sure what we're doing. Paste it here. And we don't want to do this right away. These headphones make my ears itchy. Because if this is a background thread, you don't want to, I think it's probably not a good idea to do Sublime stuff like that. You want sublime.set timeout and that one. Runs the callback in the main thread after the given delay. The default delay is 0, which is undocumented, which means it just happens right away. And we could say lambda, and the lambda would be that. And similarly, is that actually, okay, this is currently unhappy. Name thread is not defined. Oh, but I probably needed to import from threading import thread. Yeah. This is the sort of niggly this is the thing I find. I've been a C developer for better than 25 years. A long time. C was after Pascal. C was the first serious language I learned, and then I've been using some variant of that, like C, Objective C, blah blah blah. They have their own. It has its own standard library, which is fairly easy to keep the important parts in your head, how to open, close a file, blah blah blah. Uh, what I find with languages like Python and C Sharp and Java to some degree when I was using it, the syntax is easy to grasp, but what it's really hard to keep in your head is the myriad of API options, and that's why I tend to refer to examples of things like this so that I can remember how to write the code. I can't remember exactly what class I need, what method I need, things like that. Okay, so that compiles. Can this be on a different line? Looks like it. That's good. We'll give that a try. And we'll say sublime dot set timeout and thus. So I'm guessing now the reason why I did it this way, and we're going to say um, we'll just call this remote build because we need something. Remote build. So, oh, I guess I need some text wrap for that too, don't I? Maybe also, whoops, I can add that here. Let's see, from Devember 28. Oh, is that going to cause a problem for me now? I bet it is. Yeah. Fudge. Maybe I'll change the symlink locally real quick. Diggity dang. Okay, we'll quit that. As a matter of fact, we'll quit that for the time being. MB, oh sorry. Yeah. And recreate it from scratch. We'll call it underscore 2018. That'll work. And fire that back up. Okay, just to make sure everything's kosher. Now I can say there may be a cleverer way around using that, but if you watch that last stream, you know that I had issues. I wanted to name the package that was being bootstrapped one underscore something something to make sure it was the very first user package after package control to load, but it's tricky to import stuff from there, and I figured out a way to do it, but I'm not going to be doing that in the console all the time. So if I say log remote build hello, why do I have KW here? I guess because you can log things two ways. I could say this. No, that does not do what one would have expected. Oh, maybe I intended to use it like that. So you can do things like this. And also, when we do it, we can say dialog is true. And when you run it, it pops up a dialog like so. And you can also say error is true, in which case, hang on. It uses, as we can see here, this is an error dialog, although it to me looks pretty similar to the other one. This is early days in GTK3, so maybe that's slightly different. It also generates the text error down there because that's what the Sublime error message does. And you can also do error is true with dialog false, and that just always happens. Okay. So there you go. That's I like the idea of logging things. So actually, sorry, I like the idea of logging things in this manner because this way everything that gets injected into the console by me has this prefix on it, and you're not left wondering where the hell stuff came from. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is say log received and data like so. And that can all be on one line now. And this can be, whoops, log, we'll call it, well, we'll say socket error. Is it just me, or is that error, is that, I have a feeling that's not supposed to happen. I think it's going above it because it's closer to the bottom of the window and overwriting the line. That's probably a bug. Socket error. We're not going to want to, do we actually want a new line in this thing? Yeah, we do. And that, and, oops, and error. So that looks nice, and we want to have something here. Whoops. Creating network thread. And I'm not sure if oops. Oops. Network thread. I think del is the Python destructor. This is where I normally say Python destructor and well, I don't know that that's actually, yeah, there we go. Not destructor per se, the thing that gets called when something is being destroyed. So del doesn't initially call. Yeah. Basically, the idea of this whole operation here is to know when we've created a thread and when that thread goes away. I might actually say this. Oops, those are not the right things. Because you want to make sure that your threads are actually terminating and going away. And in particular, I found while I was working on override audit, while I was paranoid in doing this, that I was leaking threads somehow because part of a lambda was accidentally capturing a reference to something which circularly referenced another thing, which eventually got back to the object itself, the thread itself, and as a result, the thread would never go away. And those are the sorts of problems that I have to debug at work. I don't want to be doing that here as well. So I think that means we would say something like network thread host port dot start, if I had to guess. I'm going to delete all that stuff out, and let's see what happens. Oh, that's unfortunate. Module object has no attribute set timeout. What now? Did I do something in an unfortunate way? Oh, I see. I got hosed by that. Notice the search worked. I can see it right there in the window, but yeah, it appears in the comment up there, so it appears as a completion down here. Okay, let's try that again. Free variable error referenced before assignment in closing scope. Well, I'm not going to lie, that wasn't what I was expecting to have happened there. Do I have the... I don't. Print... do... Creating network thread. Exception, super has no attribute del and bound network thread del. There's no okay, well I'll take that out. I guess there's no superclass definition for what you might do, something like that. Seems like there might be one, unless I did not do that right. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and add a couple of lines. There we go. Oops. So, okay. So we don't need to do that. That's good. That sounds like something I probably learned before. So we can see our thread starting, we can see our thread stopping, and now variable referenced before assignment in enclosing scope. That is an intriguing does this fix it? All right. That's weird. I am willing to live with that. I'm not sure. I don't think. Should not the log call only happen if the lambda is called and not right away? In which case, how would that even happen? But that's neither here nor there. Global name host. Okay, so now our problem is this needs to be self.host and self.port. And now if I do it, the error is connection refused. And I think maybe I do need to split this on another line because I want to say error equals true. So when I do it, I get that. Socket error, error 111, connection refused, and we can see it down there, say remote build error, socket error, connection refused. Sweet. And or swank. And similarly, this one would also change to dialog. Now, just for our own edification, to see if we can see the build system generating stuff in this case, because maybe the dialog call is magic. I'm going to run it, and we get to see it doing something, but we don't get to see the dialog. That's intriguing. Oh, because that's not how that works. Let's try it again. There we go. See, we've totally resolved the issue of that. So we can actually see things going into the panel right away. So that is good, and we will quit that if I can. This is the sort of thing I noticed I can't stop it. I can't cancel it. There's the process still running. Now, I don't know, is Sublime leaking that in the background? What the hell's the deal with that? I've really only ever noticed it using this because, as you can see, my command spawned another command, and that's usually when things go all weird. So we'll go ahead and kill that bad boy, which is going to make that one defunct now. There's no good way around getting that one out of the list without stopping Sublime, but that's neither here nor there. And the reason why I like to do this. No, we'll do, whoops, you can't do that in non-Sublime. Clear in .NET Run. So now it's just running there, and that does mean if we care about what it's doing, we have to look in the console. But that's okay. So what we've actually done here is successfully threaded our code. Now what we actually want in the long term, I would imagine, is the ability to um, submit messages to this thread and have it do something instead of having it constantly spin up and stop. So let's go ahead, and I need to switch this back to Devember 2018. There's one unstaged file. I'm going to leave that logging in there for the time being so we can know that everything's all working. And we can stage it and say thread the test client for better UX response. Split the existing code out. Sorry. The command it was originally in and into a thread. It doesn't hang the UI. Thus. And there we go. Doing stuff on another monitor. Now the next thing is we want something like a thread safe queue, I'm going to say. Python thread safe queue. All right, so it's just the queue class. Okay, that's good. Bing. Multi-producer, multi-consumer, threaded programming. Implements all required locking semantics. It depends on the availability of thread support in Python. Okay. Insertion will block once the size has been reached. Okay, so we don't want that. What's a priority queue? Yeah, don't want that. Here's the theory. We want this thread to always be running while the plugin is running, and then the message, the command, when it wants to do something, it just submits jobs to the thread instead of constantly spinning a new thread up. And one reason for that is because then the network thread can attempt to maintain a connection to a remote host and keep a connection alive, which is important for conversations other than this little simple echo where the server kills us on the other end once something has been read. This is one of those things. At work, we do a lot. All of our server code that me and my coworker have architected and developed uses a lot of multi-threading uh, for concurrency because we need a lot of real-time response, and we settled a ways back on using queue as a great way to transfer control of an object from one thread to another, because putting it into the queue is thread safe, taking it out is thread safe. It's easy to cross a thread boundary that way. So the first thing to note, I guess, is we need some sort of job queue. Do I need to import something in order to, I'm guessing from queue, import queue. Uppercase with a queue. X equals Q. What's the API on this bad boy? Put and get. Put an item into the queue, block. Oh. If block is true and timeout is none, block until a free slot is available. Okay, but I'm assuming because we have no size, that's never going to happen. Okay, so we can say x dot put. I assume we can put any arbitrary thing inside. Remove and return an item from the queue if optional args block is true and timeout is none, block until necessary until an item is available. Okay, so that's definitely, I think, going to block. So I can say x.get and get hello. Now this is going to be real bad, I'm going to guess. That is not the sort of thing that you should probably do, because now Sublime is well and truly hung, waiting for something to insert something into that queue. I want to point out that I knew that was going to happen before I started. So we're just going to jump on in down here and say that and bring it back. So that's good. That is pretty much what we wanted. We're going to have a global section here. So we will say from queue import queue, and we'll say what, underscore job queue equals queue, let's say. Just for the time being. And we then want, okay. Let's think about how we want this to work. I'll put this at the top. We're going to need a couple of things here. We'll do that and say here, job queue is equal to queue. Like so. And we also want job, we'll say job thread, like so. So at plugin loaded time, job queue is queue, and job thread is equal to we'll do that. We're gonna have to change the init in a second. And here's the part where we wonder, how do you stop a running thread? If job thread is not none, then job thread dot something. Oh, and we want another one of those. I'm not entirely sure this is what I want here, but and it's missing 2 required positional arguments. I'm aware. Thank you. We'll look up thread for just a second. No, don't do that. I hate it when a page load jiggles the page. Thread objects. Start, run, join. Wait until the thread terminates. Oh. Well, I guess that's probably the best way to do that, isn't it? Okay. We want to do something. We want to say, well, the something here is, whoops, the something here is join. I'm assuming we want a timeout. Should be a floating point number specifying a timeout for the operation in seconds or fractions thereof. Well, how long could that possibly take, right? We're going to job queue. Whoop, no. Job queue. Thank you. Dot put. Was that the thing we were doing that broke stuff a second ago? Put and get, right? Whoops, too far. Put and get. We're going to put a tuple of none, none. And then we're going to join the thread. And here we're going to create a job queue. We're going to do that. Now here's the jiggy here. We don't want this anymore, and we don't want that anymore. Well, actually, we probably want to fix that, don't we? Spawn a background thread that will create. No, sorry. Yeah. Spawns background that will perform our socket IO. Let's say we actually want that, and we'll jump over to here. And yeah, yoik, that's annoying. Stage just those lines. So now that's the only thing, and we'll go ahead and amend that previous commit so that is correct. And there and there. Now we want. Now this is again, this is not necessarily the appropriate API thing for this. We'll say def. We'll call it run query for now on a host and a port. And move that up like so, let's say. So now that just gets a host and a port like that and does what it did before. And yeah, I know you're mad. Does Python have a do while? We'll say running equals true. While running, message is equal to job queue dot get. So hang until something happens. So say host port is job queue dot get because we're gonna put two tuples in. And if host is none, running equals false. Else, self-run query for host and port. Thus, and we're a little happier about that now, are we? And we can see I can see this in the console. Every time I save, it creates a network thread and destroys a network thread. Why is it destroying a network thread is the question of the day. Or why is it doing it the same one? I think I've been confused by this before as well. So if I save, creating network thread, thread 88 in initial, and destroying network thread, thread 88 in official. Oh, because I also need to start it. Now that there's actually a run method. And now it's mad because none type object has no attribute get. Line 77. Again, I have a console on my other monitor. You can sort of see that right there. So job queue is none. Why is job queue none? Oh, because that's not a global. Ah, global job queue. Okay, there we go. I always forget that. So you see, I reloaded the plugin. It created thread 103, and thread 103 is doing something. Now when I save, it's destroying thread 103 and creating thread 110. And essentially, we could actually log here is an informational message. Network thread termination requested. And I think now when whoops, don't do that. If I save now, we can see it happen sort of after it happened due to the magic of threading, but nevertheless, so that's why that's happening, which was the general idea. And now we don't want to do that. We want to say job queue dot put host port. So we don't start a new thread. And .NET run. It's listening for connections, and it still works. And for giggles, push the right icon. It still works. And we'll be able to see remote build created a network thread, thread 3. Now that thread is just sitting there forever. Now, I don't think this is necessarily the best architecture for this, but it's going to be good enough for now. The idea being when this file is loaded, it creates the queue that you can use to pass jobs to the thread, and then it creates that thread and starts it running. And when the plugin is unloaded, if their thread is actually running, which frankly always it should be, then it's going to put request to the thread to ask it to please stop running now, and then try to join the thread, but with only a 1/4 second timeout. So after a 1/4 second, it'll leave. I consider this best practices. I'm used to using, P threads, and you want to join your threads up and whatnot. So we can see that happening. We can see that happening. It runs forever, getting jobs. So that's going to hang it, and it's not going to burn CPU, which is actually something that I could probably test. This is the terminal I normally use as well. Huge. If I top it, the OBS is using a fair amount of CPU, and so is Discord apparently. Sublime does not seem to be even in the top list there, which is one of those nice things to use. Good gravy. There we go. So the idea now is that there is one thread just always running, and we can send it a host name and a port, and it will send a message it'll run query to that particular port, right? Um, so let's go ahead and commit that as well. The I don't know if I said at the beginning of this, actually, in the little rambly part, it was my intention to mention that the first goal is to make this the client side threaded so the Sublime doesn't hang, because otherwise anything we do is likely to be as painful as when I knowingly got the integrated interpreter to block forever on a queue that could never have anything inserted into it. I want to fix that first. And the next thing to do is generate binary messages, or if we will, generate actual messages to transmit to the other side, um, and get responses from the other side in that message format, to start working on our little protocol for how we're going to talk to the remote end. Um, so we have a queue that we can use. Realistically, one could pass the job queue directly to the network thread so that it knows what queue it's supposed to do something with, but there still needs to be something somewhere that's a global that all of the commands can use. Perhaps there might actually be a way to fix that. So let's go ahead and we'll commit. Again, this is the sort of thing I like to do while I'm working on something, is when I incrementally work towards a goal and stage my changes and commit them so that I can iterate on it. And if it breaks, I can go back to a known good thing without worrying what I might have changed in the interim. So make the client thread persistent. Instead of having the client command spawn a new thread every time the command is executed, we instead have a single thread which can be sent messages via a queue. This is the step towards having a messaging mechanism that's decoupled from the command that's being executed. And then we could actually go ahead and say, well, let's see. We definitely need to get rid of something in plugin unloaded. My thought was there's only ever one instance of an application command ever. So the application command could have the queue. And then there would be a command that you could use to send a message, and it could use that queue directly. You got to try and figure what gets executed first. Do the commands get executed before the plugin loaded gets executed? And also, clearly something needs to keep a handle to the thread and to the queue, well, to the thread at least, to get rid of its contents. It might actually be, is it safe to say del none? I guess so. Would you actually use del on a queue to get rid of it? I don't know. I'm assuming garbage collection is my friend here. Where was I going with that whole operation? I'm always worried about leaking objects, especially in a threaded environment, because that goes pear-shaped quickly. We want the current thread to go away when the plugin is unloaded. Theoretically, in the real case, that only ever happens when the package gets updated or removed, i.e. added to the ignored packages list. Otherwise, plugin loaded is called and everything else uh, runs forever, and Sublime quits without triggering a plugin unload. So you want to be able to stop a running thread so that there's not multiples getting in the way, but at the same time, there still needs to be something that's a global In a command is probably a better way to go. We're not going to worry about that right now. What we are going to do is maybe something like this. Oh, hang on a second. Man, um, I have ridiculous, the headset really makes my ears itchy after an extended period of time. Um, so we're going to pass none, none, none there. And here we'll say host port message. And this will be message. And this will have message. And this will be message plus, yeah, EOF. Hmm, that'll just be message. Well, we'll do it up here. It's just to be sure of order of operations. Like so. That still looks okay. Of course, every time I save this now there's threads being destroyed and recreated. Incidentally, the send and receive here use bytes objects, so I'm encoding the strings as UTF-8, and the server decodes them as UTF-8, which is 100% not the right thing to do. On the server end of this operation, because the echo server, as implemented in that sample that I took things from, when it reads data from the socket, it gets bytes. It assumes they're ASCII bytes and just adds them to a string builder. But because I was encoding them as UTF-8 here, I decode them as UTF-8 instead of ASCII in the server. And that means that there is a potential for problems if there's a UTF-8 code point that's more than 1 byte wide. And it just so happens that a read call provides some of the bytes, but not all of the bytes, i.e. it doesn't handle incremental decoding. But there's a lot of stuff that's not right with this as far as a real world solution is concerned for error checking and what for. So let's not worry about that too much. For example, sock send here doesn't necessarily send everything you give it, because it can only fill up the underlying socket buffer for the socket to do something with. So it actually returns a number to tell you how much it's sent, and we should actually be capturing that and doing it in a loop until we've sent the whole thing. But we only care so much for things. Now down here, we need to do this, and we get a little bit of that action, so that's nice. We can actually generate some sort of message there. Now I could add this to the command palette, but I don't know that I want to do that. Probably do something like this. Message, and we'll say, oops, don't need a comma. The caption is that the initial text is last message or self.last message. We'll bring it down here. And on done is, let's say, on done should be expect a single string argument. I only care about on done. Let's say lambda test, lambda self.test. Oh, such. And then def test. Oh. sorry, host port message. So we'll actually bring it down like this. Self host port and message like so, but we also say self.last message equals message. So we are unhappy because I forgot to do that. And when I hit the key, oh yeah, that's irritating. On change and on cancel are both not optional. So there we go. So now it's giving me the message. Hello world. I could probably add a default for that. And when I hit enter, I get a problem because this is not host. So let's try it again. Mistyped and all. And if I do it again, I see the same thing as last time. Teapot time. Okay. Let's just say thus. So we see that as the default, and it ends up working the way it used to work, but now we can actually input our own message in there, if you will, which I think is probably fairly important. So let's stay all in the one file still. Of course, I only have the one file. Whoops. We say include the message text in the queue entry. In order to move towards the idea of sending arbitrary messages to the other side of the connection and getting arbitrary messages back, we can go ahead and spell that right. This modifies the command, modifies the tuple passed to the thread to include not only where it should go, but what the text should be. And that's a pretty simple thing there. Now, right now, of course, the server is going to echo back. Hopefully that did not sound too terrible. What we actually want now is a class of, let's say, protocol message. What we're trying to build here is the beginnings of being able to transmit something to the remote end of this particular system. And I'm thinking what we want there is something like we'll just do this for the time being. So we're going to create a protocol message of some sort, right? And realistically, there's, I would say, two things that we want to be able to do. We want to be able to, the name of this particular message is something. What I'm thinking is a protocol wherein ultimately it's going to be binary. For right now, we're going to abstract it to be text. We want something where we send first an integer that is exactly how many bytes are about to follow, and then that many bytes. And that many bytes will be a single message that's sending something to the other side. And then within that message, we say the first integer size thing, say the first 4 bytes or the first 2 bytes or something, is a numeric ID that is the message type. So maybe we would call that message type and expect it to return a number of some sort, where -1 is, let's say, not valid because they have to be positive or greater than 0, perhaps. And following that would be the payload of the body, um, whose job it is to actually transmit the message. And we'll say that as the person sending, as a well-defined protocol, we know message 0 has this layout, message 1 has that layout, and so on and so forth. And the code can make sure that what it's providing is always the right number of bytes for something. So and this might actually be something that's built into Python. I'm thinking something like pickle or object marshalling or something along those lines, but we want it to interact with the C# server. So we're going to do it our own way, and we'll say encode is going to return some bytes, and I'm not sure. Oh yeah, I'm missing some selves here, aren't I? Just thinking through this in my head. I'm imagining that you create a protocol message somehow. Um, let's do this. Let's create a Scratch Python buffer. So we would say, when we're trying to create a message to send to the other side, what would we do? We would probably say, well, first of all, we know this. We know there's a class protocol message that has some API in it, and it's the base of this entire system, right? And then we might say class introduction message is a subclass or implements, or however you use that here, protocol message. And then we might have class echo message, and that's also a protocol message, and it does something. So what would we do? You'd never create a protocol message directly. You would say message equals introduction message, and then pass arguments like my name, and say, I don't know, like a user ID like 0 or something, let's say. This is not what we're doing in the code, we're just saying. And then what we would do is say job queue, or in our case, maybe it would be message queue put message. And that message gets transmitted away to the other side somehow. Now, what happens in the message queue put? Well, actually, message queue wouldn't be a queue like it is in our code over there. It would be some object that we created, and behind the scenes, say it would be implemented like this, right? So instead of saying that, we would say put to queue and put the message to it. So what would actually happen in here is you could say message dot data size. I'll say data is equal to message dot encode, like so. So this encode doesn't take any arguments because this class needs this method to know exactly how to do something with itself. And then we could say, now we would say message queue dot put, and it would be a tuple, and the first thing would be the length of the data, and the second thing would be the data. And that would be a signal to the network code that it should write first this integer value and then this data, whatever it is, which should return a bytes object to the other side. And the other side would then read the first 4 bytes, know exactly how big the payload is supposed to be, and then read that much data. And we know that the very first byte in there, say the first 4 bytes, is the message type. So using that on the remote server, it would have some data and it would need to create another message. And how could we do that? I'm guessing maybe this needs to be something like at class method. Is that a thing? So that if there was a get response, which got just a data, like so, we could say message ID is equal to, data.get first int, or, however you would do that in Python. And then a switch would tell us the class to use, and then we could say we know that message ID 2 is an echo message. So we could say message is equal to echo message dot decode the data. And what we would end up with is an instance of this class echo message that has fields or whatever. And we could return it or do whatever we want. So talking through the whole API here, the general idea is we need a class that can take, so we don't want to do this. The raw constructor should be blank because the subclass needs to implement an init that knows how to do something with the arguments provided there. For you to create one. As a matter of fact, maybe it would be a keyword args type operation, and then we would actually have to say name equals Terrence Martin and ID equals 0, for example. Then we don't need to have this be a class method, and we don't need a decode. Well, yeah. So now you can create a message. You have to use keys and values when you construct it, just like you would, like, say, with the dictionary. That is going to provide an instance of the class introduction message set up with those fields, which are unique to that particular protocol message. And when you call put to queue, it can call the encode method on the thing, which is going to do something to turn it into bytes. And then actually, we don't even need to do that. We can just put the data, right? And the thing that gets the other end can figure out the size. It writes it to the other side. When we get a response back from the other end, in that case, we have the data, we get the first int, we use that to figure out which of the protocol messages it is. And now we can say echo message data equals data, like so, or decode equals data. We'll say maybe like this, decode data equals data. And Thus, the constructor here, since it takes keyword arguments, knows that decode data when it gets it is the thing that it should use to decode all of the data into as if it was called this way and return that message back like so. And then we would have a message to work with. So that's sort of what we're going to be aiming towards doing. Fleshing out this and getting byte messages. And just to start with, we'll just come up with our own simple messages like a text message or a JSON message or an int message or something, because we need to be able to encode and decode. We also, in that case, need to think of the following. The thread needs not only a job, well, here it's called job queue. It would actually probably be called message queue, let's say. Um, or outgoing queue or something for you to put messages into the system. And it also has to be able to deliver messages out and back to you. There needs to be a system for that as well. Now, this is the sort of system that I've developed many a time before. So I probably have a few ideas if I just think about what the best way to structure it with regards to a Sublime plugin is, but we are at 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 2 seconds according to my Fitbit. So we're going to call the stream here right now. And I'm going to go ahead and finish up. Is there actually any code here that's changed that needs to be committed? There's the stub for the prototype message, so I'll probably try to work this stuff in there a little bit into the nascent protocol message API, which isn't going to have any effect on anything. But for right now, I'm going to quit the stream so I can do that and create the dev blog for this. So we're just going to call it there, and we'll see you tomorrow when we attempt to continue on with this. And remember, as I said earlier at the beginning of the stream, because tomorrow is Sunday, I got a lot of stuff going on chore-wise, running the weekend errands, doing the weekend exercise routines, and then just relaxing and spending time with family. So I'm not also going to not have a lot of time during the day to be able to work on this either. But come Monday, hopefully there'll be more time for me to get rolling on this sort of stuff. We want to spend a week, maybe 2 weeks on getting all of the network code nailed down and being able to transfer back and forth, and then we can start in on actually using that system to do our remote builds. So this is ODAT Nerd signing off for day 1 of Devember, and have a Devember-y Sublime day.